Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be doing the USFL playoff power rankings for the 2022 season. This will be the last power rankings video until after the playoffs, and we're basically going to be looking at every team heading into the playoffs to the first round, and I guess second. So, without further ado, let's just get started because there is a multitude of teams moving, including a couple that might be shockers. Coming in at number 8 again is the Pittsburgh Mallers. As you can see, the record speaks for themselves. They're 1-9, and they lost the Tank Bowl, so it's pretty safe to say that they deserve this spot, and they have earned this spot by being this bad. Because at the end of the year, they finished just 4 points away from having a negative 100-point differential in a 10-week season. That is incredible. That shows such ineptitude by a team that they barely missed out on losing by 100 points across the season. That basically means in every game, they've nearly lost by 10 points, which is pretty much nearly a blowout. That's insane. Now, in the points scored margin, if it wasn't for the Bandits being pretty inept themselves, this team legitimately would have rivaled the Bandits, or this team would have been if you cast away the Bandits, they're 50 points nearly behind 6th place. So aside from the Bandits, they are far below everyone else in the point scored margin as well. So it makes sense this team lost. They couldn't score and they couldn't defend. That's why they got shelled on in the Tank Bowl. That's why their only win came from a last-second touchdown. They're the worst team in the league, and it's literally the easiest spot of any team to be placed on this entire list because they've pretty much been here all but 2 weeks. Coming in at number 7, once again, is the Michigan Panthers. They beat Pittsburgh in the Tank Bowl, and I was debating on moving them higher, but I decided to hold off on that. I don't want to overreact too much, because I know some people are going to put them over the Bandits, because if you look at the points scored and point differential, they are ahead of them in both now. They're actually 4th in points scored and actually were able to reach the 200-point mark, and in point differential, they are ahead of them by a bit. But I decided not to put them above them because at the end of the day, this is mainly due to the fact that they played the Mallers their last week. They were able to score 30 on them. They won by 10 points. So if you kind of forget the fact that they got to play the Mallers twice and that was 2 of their wins, then you kind of realize that this team isn't that good. You know what I mean? But you have to give them credit at least, I guess, for, winning the Tank Bowl since they now get the first overall pick in next year's draft. It's just, I really wanted to put them above the Bandits because, this is my team. But being objective, you can't really do that. Their 2 wins in the entire year were against the same team, and it's the most poverty franchise in the league so far. So you have to kind of say where it is, but you know what? They got the job done. Their point differential and points scored are going to look much better than they would have without them. So credit's due. They're 7th. They're not the worst team in the league. Yet they're still getting the first overall pick in next year's draft. Coming in at number 6 is going to be the Tampa Bay Bandits. Man, this team is just not that good. I honestly am not a huge fan of this team whatsoever. I can't really understand some of the hype behind it. It's just, you expect this team to be really good, and they ended up not being really good. They ended up pretty much doing nothing the whole year, and, They just benefited from 2 things. So I already talked about the point differential stuff, so I'm not going to harp on that again. But to put it simply, the only thing people are going to say is, well, Talmu led the league in all the point stats and stuff. I'm going to do a whole video on this, but Talmu's stats to me were a lot of empty calorie, not really that impressive stats in the grand scheme of things. Yes, he is the only quarterback with 2,000 yards. That is impressive that he was able to do that, but he's also the only quarterback in the entire league that started 10 games. No one else did. So, it comes with a grain of salt there for that reason. And his touchdown to interception ratio of 14-12 isn't really that good. Yes, his QBR is overall pretty solid, but, this was because I think the way they did it, suffice to say, his stats really weren't that impressive if you look at it from a per week idea. In terms of turnovers, this team finished dead last at -10. That is 4 less than the Panthers, who are 7th. So they were turning the ball over all the time, and a lot of that was Talmu. And then in terms of what they were really good at, was really nothing. I mean, rushing yards per game, they finished sixth. Didn't even crack 100. And in terms of passing yards per game, they actually finished fifth at 186 passing yards per game. And you may say, how? They have the best passer. Well, as I said, a lot of other guys either didn't play that often, got hurt, or stuff like that. So Talmu pretty much got to just keep doing his thing, despite the fact that he really wasn't doing that great. And plus, passing yards per game also has, sacks, which Talmu took a lot of. He took 25 sacks, which was also the most in the league. Meaning their offensive line that was supposed to be good wasn't good. Their quarterback had stats, but really wasn't that awesome. They literally had no ground game. And aside from their punter, they had nothing of note that was really good. Coming in at number 5 is the Houston Gamblers. The Gamblers deserve to move up. To put it simply, they've had an excellent last 2 weeks. They beat the Birmingham Stallions, who were undefeated, 17-15. Now, the Stallions, as I said, are not as dominant as they were in the beginning, but it still is an impressive feat. And yes, they did play the backup quarterback, but there were still multiple starters playing in the New Orleans Breakers, and they were able to crush them 20-3. So those 2 wins are very big deals. To me, it shows a lot. And then not to mention, they have the pretty much only 2 guys who are going to really receive any DPOY votes in Donald Payne and Chris Odom, who lead the league in tackles and lead the league in sacks, and are overall just 2 of the best players in the entire league. They have 3 total on the all-defense team. It's pretty simple. They've been excellent the last 2 weeks, and I think that's enough to put them over the Bandits, especially when you go to the point differential and points scored list, and they are above them by 2 spots in both of them. They're 5th in points scored, and they're 5th in point differential to Tampa's 7th in both. So, even though they didn't crack 200 points, and they didn't crack the neutral point differential, they've been excellent the last couple weeks. They've been overall with a historic defense in terms of just how dominant some of those players have been. The Bandits, while they continue to just tread water being not that good, the Gamblers have at least given some hope for next year. For if some of these guys stay, they have a pretty good core for next year. Number 4 is the New Orleans Breakers. I actually was thinking about moving them to 5th. I'm not going to lie. I decided not to because I said, hey, you know what? They didn't have their starting quarterback. They let him rest. So I didn't. But overall, this is not a really good sign for the Breakers. To lose 20-3 to the Gamblers isn't that good. Because the bottom line, they still played their starting everyone else, pretty much. And it's not like any of their receivers had an outstanding game. It's not like any of their running backs had a good game either. So when your totals for receiving and rushing are that bad and they have other starters playing, that's not good. I mean, Bertolo missed another kick, and they got completely shelled by the Gamblers to where it wasn't even close. So for that reason, I'm scared, especially considering I've never been that high on some of their players. But the only silver lining is they are leading the league in points allowed. At 148, they lead the league by about 12 points, which is the only saving grace for that team. Coming at number 3, and this might shock people, is the Stallions. I can't put them higher. I can't put them 2. I just can't. This team has played so poor the last few weeks. And at the end of the day, they did beat the Bandits, and it wasn't as ugly as most games. But man, their quarterbacks played not that good. They played pretty bad, actually. So, they started with Jamar. He was horrid. They went to Magoo. He was bad. I mean, the stats show for themselves. They both played bad. And then, Maribel and Scarborough both were solid. But it's just, the only player who really had a great game was Sage Surratt because he had one really long reception. But if I'm a Stallions fan, man, I'm worried. The Stallions aren't going to have this home crowd advantage for the playoffs. And considering the fact that their quarterbacks went from being, with Jamar being, oh, he's going to win MVP to yikes, he hasn't been that good lately, is bad. And aside from Aubrey, there's not a single player on this team. Victor Bolden leads the league in all-purpose yards. But in terms of stats that really are a big deal, there's almost nothing this team leads. So I'm scared for that reason alone. Because there's not really anyone on this team that you look at and say, like, yes, DeMarcus Gates is solid, and like, yes, Scooby is pretty solid too, but there's not a single defender that you look at and you say that's a game-changing defender like you can with the Gamblers, like you can with the Stars. But so for me, it's just I have a hard time putting this team in the top two right now. I know they have 9-1, but to put it simply, I think that the team that's ahead of them deserves to be ahead of them. So I'm gonna put them ahead, especially considering the fact that they played a much tougher team. So yeah, coming in at number 2 are the Philadelphia Stars. And this might be a shock to some people, but to put it simply, the Stars in general has both played their starters. They wanted to get a feel for how each other were going to play. And at the end of the day, Cook has had a really solid game. He went 19 for 33, 244 yards, 7.4 average, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception on 88 QBR. That's solid. That's a solid stat line. And, I mean, Matt Colburn was decent as well. And we all know he'll have that one game where he'll be insane and he'll get, some stupid touchdown. But I have to put the Stars above because they're able to hold the Generals to a very close game. So I feel like you have to give them credit for that, especially considering the fact that they do lead the league in turnovers. When you lead the league in turnovers, you're getting extra chances at scoring, and it can make an inept defense or offense look better when you're getting those turnovers. So the fact that they're averaging nearly a turnover per game is a very big deal, and because of that, I have to put them above the Stallions. I think the Stallions are, they're a good team, like they're a great team, but the Stars have been playing a lot better football in more recent areas, and as for right now, there's a good chance that you could argue that Case Cookus is one of the most elite quarterbacks in the league. So I'm going to put the Stars at number 2, because honestly, I think that playoff game between them and the Generals, well, I'll talk about that in my playoff video. Coming in at number 1 are the New Jersey Generals. They won their game, but simply put, I mean, who else are you going to put here? Darius Victor leads the league in rushing touchdowns. That's pretty good. And then you get to the actual stats. Rushing yards per game, the Generals ended up leading the league. Your punt return average, they led the league. Third down percent, they led the league. Yards per game, they led the league. The way they play is very simple. They run, but they have 2 quarterbacks who they can use to throw. This 2-quarterback system, I've always thought a 2-quarterback system can work if you play it right, and this is definitely right. The fact is, DeAndre is a much better passer than, you would think, because, the stereotype is a running quarterback isn't that good at throwing. He's a really solid passer. That being said, Luis Perez is a better passer, but his legs aren't as bad as you'd imagine for a passing quarterback. You see what I mean? You have 2 guys who one is a primary rusher and a primary passing quarterback, yet they're both much better at the other than you would imagine. And so when you have that dual dynamic, you can do pretty much anything you want. I mean, that's why they were able to beat the Stars. Because if you look at it, they both were able to just pretty much do anything. I mean, they really were. I mean, DeAndre, he had an 80 completion percentage. Perez had something insane. They both had over 100 yards. Luis had 3 touchdowns in the air. And overall, they were both, they combined for 78.6% completion percentage. They were solid. And then running the ball, DeAndre had an 8.2 yards per carry. And that's what this team's able to do. They're just able to be a very solid team. And I think that's what gives them their great advantage. So I think that they've earned this number 1 spot. But I guess the idea is just, can they beat the Stars in the playoffs? Can they get the sweep? I guess we'll have to find out next week. So that'll do it for the playoff power rankings. The next power ranking video we'll be doing after the playoffs and seeing how, mainly the top 4 teams change. Unless there's a couple of major announcements for the bottom 4 teams, they're probably going to stay the same. But overall, this week, I was really shocked at a couple of the games. I did not expect the Panthers to blow out the Mallers like they did. And the bandits Stallions game was just, man. But you know what? The playoffs are happening. It's going to be a really exciting time. Hopefully we get a couple great games from that, and the championship game will be awesome too in 2 weeks. But without further ado, this is ZomFox. If you enjoy this content, want to be notified as soon as I upload any video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great night.